there's a rumor that they had advance notice of this exodus happening to them, and they secreted all, or they took all of their treasures, so-called treasures. So this is where the treasure legends came from.
Okay, well, I have here David Kier. He is the author of Baja California, Land of Missions, and he spent much of his life exploring the Baja California and its missions, and he knows a ton, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to him. David, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Damian. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
Awesome. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get involved with Baja California and its history and its missions?
Exactly. Well, it was a fun life for me. It started probably when I was about 7 years old, in the mid 1960s. My father, who was a dentist, was also a avid fisherman, sports fisherman. And of course, Baja California, especially back then, is very famous for its excellent fishing opportunities. And one of my father's patients told my dad that, hey, the greatest fish in the world is in Baja California. In particularly, it was a place called Gonzaga Bay. And my father said, well, great. How do I get there? He said, well, you need to have a Jeep. You need to have four-wheel drive. It's a very tough, rugged road. And my dad says, well, I have a wife and a son, and a Jeep, like, thinking of a military style Jeep or CJ, is just not appropriate to, for a camping trip, I don't think. And my dad's patient, a fellow named Andy Anderson, he said, oh, no, no, Jeep has got this new vehicle called the Wagoneer. It's luxurious. It's got four-wheel drive. It's got air conditioning and lots of room for camping gear inside out of the dust. And my dad went out and bought one. I don't know if it happened the next day, but pretty soon after that. And the first trip for me was to Gonzaga Bay, or Bahia San Luis Gonzaga, south of San Felipe. It's about 220 miles south of the border on the east coast of Baja California. And I remember little bits of that. I was obviously very young, but I remember bits of that, and I remember getting sunburned on a trip. But it was a great experience and an introduction. And after that, my parents said this was great. They love Baja. They love the country, the fishing, obviously. And my mother, who also enjoyed examining old cemeteries and thus old mission sites and so forth, incorporated the history aspect of it with the fishing and off-roading aspect of it. And that was just the beginning, and multiple trips, including all the way to the tip of Baja in 1966, long before the new highway was built, of course, in 73. And that was a really big introduction to me. And as soon as I turned 16 years old, it was in 74, and on spring break, another school friend and I, with my parents' blessing, because they knew I was very well indoctrinated into how Mexico and Baja works, even at 16 years old, uh, gave the blessing, and we took that spring break trip. And the first night of that trip camping was at Mission San Fernando de Velicata, which was the first Franciscan California mission, as Junipero Serra was traveling north from Loreto to establish San Diego and later Monterrey. And so that was my kind of first connection with the missions, camping there at the ruins at San Fernando. And it just more trips evolved after that. And from my first vehicle, which was a VW powered dune buggy, street legal, with a roof rack and luggage rack on top for camping gear, and my friends that rode with me. And that evolved into having a Jeep, and involved having for a few years, a Subaru four-wheel drive wagon, which was able to take everywhere, even though it had very small tires back in those days. But and then now I drive a Toyota Tacoma, which is very capable and goes pretty much anywhere. And that's 60 years, because I'm 68 years old now, and that's over 60 years of Baja experience. And it just I was so fascinated with the roads and documenting the peninsula. Matter of fact, on that on a trip we took in free, the Baja California Highway, Mexico #1, was under construction. And there was nothing available about it yet, so I took copious notes on mileages. As my dad drove, I was sitting between my dad and mom, like I did back when I was a kid in a Wagoneer, and this was now in a Ford station wagon. Because my dad said, "Well, they're paving the highway. We don't need to have a Jeep anymore." And he bought a more luxurious Ford station wagon at the time. And it turns out there was still over 100 and some miles unpaved and unconstructed yet. So we were even driving the old Baja 1000 route of the old Baja main road before even the highway crews had gotten to a part of it. Anyway, I took notes about that, and when I came home, I wanted to share that with everybody. I got my sister, because I wasn't a typer, got my sister to type it up for me, and her husband was a bank manager, and he had access to a copy machine, so made copies. And I put together my first book, if you want to call that, or a booklet, called Baja and the Transpeninsular Highway. And it was a guide to where the pavement ended and where the new highway was, and all these things that wasn't available yet to all the Baja enthusiasts that were anxiously looking forward to the highway's route and so forth. But in that little booklet that I made and self-published, I put down a list of all the missions and the dates they were founded and so forth. So I included missions very way back then. Uh, then that evolved into another Baja guidebook that was published by a magazine about Baja California the next year. We took another trip when the highway was finished in '74 and road logged as much as that and other roads that I've been on. And then just life goes on, and lots of Baja trips, lots of camping trips. I love to draw maps. When I was a kid driving with my parents down the peninsula, my job as a little, 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever kid, was to read from the Lower California Guidebook, which was called the Baja Bible back in those days, by Howard Gulick and Peter Gerhard. And it was a very deeply detailed road guide with road logs, mileages, and historical notes. Peter Gerhard, a published Baja California historian, did the book Pirates of Baja California and other works on the missions, was a historian in the guidebook. So Howard Gulick was a map maker and road log guy, and Peter Gerhard provided historical information. So that made me aware of more detailed history of the missions than just a rambling of names and dates. And uh, always an interest of me. And I became friends with one of the with a few of the Baja California authors, just through associations and letter writing, and eventually the internet. Coral Pepper was one of those, and she wrote the book Baja California Lost Missions, Strange Stories, and it was a very exciting book. Not a lot of factual information, but more flowery, fun notes and stories about lost missions. And by the way, there is no lost missions, if but that didn't stop people from treasure hunting and doing damage to some mission walls, looking for pots of gold that they had read about. But anyway, I became friends of hers and was enthused with the way she detailed every mission in her way. And I knew eventually I had to write a book that was more accurate with historical facts as we knew them at the time. And that's when I put together, well, let me step back a second. Um, an author, a book, and you're probably aware of it, uh, El Camino Real and its Historic Bells by Max Carrillo.
Yeah, I have a copy of that.
Yeah, he and I became friends and working together, and he wanted to produce a new book, um, The Old Missions of Baja and Alta California in 2012. And he made me a co-author with he and his lady on that, so I could provide the Baja California mission details, and he would incorporate it into his knowledge of the Alta California missions. And we put those missions in order of their founding, not from north to south or south to north, as books tend to do, maybe for easy reference for people traveling around looking at missions. But we put the missions together, and of course, first it was the Baja California missions, because that was California first. The peninsula was California. and originally was thought to be an island, but very soon discovered it was not an island. However, map makers like to show California as an island for many years after it was known not to be an island. So the question kept going around: is it an island? Is it connected? And eventually, thanks to Father Consag, his canoe voyage to the Upper Gulf of California and finding the Colorado River Delta, um, that was in the 17, 1740s, uh, proved once again that California was not an island. So,
Can I stop you for a second?
yeah, sure.
One of the things that it makes me think of is the fact that before say Serra and Portola and the Spanish came and established missions and presidios in Alta California, for the most part, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we refer to California prior to that time, we're talking about what is today considered Baja California. So when people spoke about California in the past, they were really thinking about what is today Baja California.
Exactly. When the Spanish finally made their way north into San Diego and beyond, they had no different name for the land. It was still part of California and was all California. And actually, in some cases, that went all the way up to Vancouver or beyond, or beyond, as what was California, until things kind of got broken down. And eventually, when the Spanish were placing governors around, and they knew that such an expansive land from Cabo San Lucas to beyond Monterey and San Francisco Bay, um, would need some definition, which California area you're talking about. So that's kind of where the idea of a lower and an upper California, Baja y Alta California, or also they called it New California, Nueva California, and California and Antigua California, Old California, also on maps. So between Old Antigua and Lower Baja, Baja finally won out. That's how they but it's still one governor for the whole area. And the California missions were from the first California mission, which was Loreto in 1697, to we're talking about San Rafael and Sonoma, but beyond the San Francisco Bay, the last Alta California mission, were all California missions. But eventually, the division came when the Jesuits were removed from California, by order of the king. The Jesuits had become out of favor with all different courts of Europe, and their time had come finally in California, which was governed as an autonomous territory of the Jesuits, a theocracy in a way. And so uh, there were rumors that they were hoarding gold and pearls and silver and whatever, and the king wasn't getting his royal fifth, and so they became out of favor. And there's other reasons too. They were just out of favor with the royal families, and the King of Spain finally was convinced that you need to remove those Jesuits. So the Jesuits were rounded up like prisoners in a way, but treated fairly, at least while they were still in California, and basically moved on to a boat and taken across the Sea of Cortez or Gulf of California to the mainland, marched across to the other side of the mainland, and shipped back to Cadiz, España, Spain, and were imprisoned basically. And eventually, the Jesuits who were from other European countries out of Spain were returned to their countries, and the Spanish Jesuits had a little bit harder time regaining their freedom. At least that's the way I've learned it from reading and listening. And in replacing the Jesuits, the Spanish crown installed the Franciscans, and Junipero Serra, now a saint, was the first was the president of the California Franciscans, and came to Loreto with others to reoccupy the missions with the Franciscan padres. And then a year later, this was early '68 when he came to California. And in early '69, it was decided that, hey, we hear these Russians are coming down from Alaska, And before they get to these great harbors our sailors have told us about at San Diego and Monterey, they hadn't discovered San Francisco Bay because the Golden Gate was always shrouded with fogs and clouds, and they never could see that opening to discover that huge, wonderful bay at San Francisco. So Monterey was believed to be the next best bay to the north. But anyway, Sarah was instructed to establish missions, which were in a way like a colony, Spanish footing at San Diego and eventually at Monterey. And that's why the march, and it was an overland, not by ship, for Sarah and others to go from Loreto up the El Camino Real. He established Mission San Fernando in 1769 as the first Franciscan California mission, and then he established San Diego as his second California Franciscan mission. Of course, the history books see things politically since the United States acquired Alta California, and so San Diego, in a way, became the first California mission, but it's really the first Alta California mission. So that's kind of a little bit of news. And that's what Max Carrillo wanted to instill, that, these were all California missions. So our first book was the Old Missions of Baja and Alta California. Let me see if I can show you a cover of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I recognize that book.
Okay. And then after I wrote my book on the Baja missions only, with more details, a lot more details than that first book had. I just touched on history in that book with Max. He wanted to do a more expanded version of it, and this was the 2020.
Okay. All right.
And we changed the title a little bit, Old Missions of the Californias, with
Mm-hmm.
Max and I, and that was published in 2020 by we published it, and then Sunbelt in San Diego, Sunbelt Publications distributed it. And Sunbelt distributes my book, which is Baja California, Land of Missions.
Well, we're going to link to the books so that people can get them.
Thank you.
Because I have a copy of your book. I was not aware of the book that you wrote with Max. So that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to get a copy of that as well.
That got me into wanting to write, the books, things like this is really good. And I need to, what I did for Max in his book that we co-authored together was just a little bit of history, of a couple of photos, and not much. It's great for, a little bit of basic information, which most people probably that's enough for them but us history nuts, we want more, and at least I want more. I'm a Virgo, and I want details, and I want to know more about it, and I want to know who was there, and when they were there, and why they were there, and how they got there. The whole newspaper writing thing: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And I try to put that in my book, Baja California Land of Missions.
So can you paint us a picture of the missions of Baja California? First of all, how many are there, and what state are they in today if people go and visit them?
Sure. The Mexicans like to say there are 27 missions, and I guess you could say there are 27 missions, but there are only 25 founded by the Spanish. These are Spanish missions, and then what happened was after Baja California agreed to the change of government on the mainland, and that would happen in the spring of 1822, a year after Mexico's, winning the war with Spain. There were still Dominican, and then by that time, by the way, so Franciscans were there for 5 years on the peninsula, and then they discovered San Diego North as, oh my goodness, the land of milk and honey is up here. The missions in Baja were already in decline when the Franciscans came over. Diseases introduced not by the Padres, but by pearlers, pirates, and others, maybe some soldiers, really decimated the native population. And of course, relocating Indians that lived on the peninsula, changing their way of life, was just devastating overall. I think we all know that. But this is what happened. We're not agreeing or disagreeing with it. We're just reporting what we know to be the facts, at least as best as we know them with what we have today. So the Franciscans, after they discovered San Diego, relented to sharing California mission duties with the Dominican Padres. And in 1773, they handed over the peninsula to the Dominican order, who were just thrilled. They thought they were only going to get a few missions in an agreement that was kind of negotiated years earlier. and they got the whole peninsula. Of course, when they came over in 1773 to discover the missions were really in bad shape, a lot of them, most of them, and on the peninsula. But they went on. They went on. They built magnificent cut stone churches at least at three locations: San Ignacio, Santa Gertrudis, and San Borja. And they continued on for well, actually, almost more than the Jesuit period. And they continued on until the last California mission was operating in 1849 at Santo Tomas, which is about 25 miles south of Ensenada. And that was the last mission where a missionary was doing mission services for the Indians and for the church lands and whatever, his church lands. And finally, a group of 49ers heading to the gold fields uh, took or were sold altar vestments by one of the members of the mission there in Santo Tomas while the padre was out of town. I think he was at San Diego visiting with his Franciscan brothers. And when he returned, he discovered that this member of the mission did this, and he was just infuriated, and he just said, "Oh, that's it, I'm done." And he went south to La Paz. And that was the last California mission to operate, was at Santo Tomas. But
So,
yeah,
so if I understood correctly, the Jesuit order comes in the late 17th century, 1697, right? They're there until the late 18th century, so 1768, correct? Then the Franciscan order takes over for a few years, and then finally, and we're talking about Baja California here now. Then finally, the Dominican order takes over and operates those missions into 1849. Is what you said? Is that
correct.
right?
Right. But when Baja California agreed to the New Mexican Empire, it was an empire before it was a republic. When that happened in 1822, maybe most of the Dominicans said, "Okay, we're done. No longer Spanish missions, no longer Spain, and Baja California isn't the land of milk and honey as Alta California is." They left, but a few remained of the Padres, Dominican Padres, and I have a chapter about that period where the transition was, and how the Dominicans that stayed on, they named them, and they also invited some Macedonian Padres to assist them. They had three Macedonians, if I'm pronouncing that right, came over.
Macedonians from the Balkans, from Eastern Europe,
Well,
Central Europe.
oh no, you know what? I'm probably saying that word wrong then. It's another Catholic order, and
It could be the Mercedarians.
yeah, there you go. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. If I remember correctly, in Spain, I think that their name derives from the fact that they used to ransom prisoners from the Ottomans. And because especially during the 16th, 17th century, when there were a lot of Turkish pirates along the coasts of the Mediterranean, etc., and they would take prisoners and make them slaves. And I think one of the Mercedarians would gather money to pay the ransom, if I'm not mistaken. But that could be who they were.
Yeah, I think it's correct. I'll have to open up my book to check. I read the book, so I don't have to remember everything. I can just refer to it there.
Right.
As you get older, as you'll discover as you get older, the memory starts to slip on a certain thing. So
I'm there already.
So anyway, so there's a few of the Dominicans and some of the Mercedarians were in Baja California the last few years, from 1822 to, and in this case, the last Padre, 1849. But I give the dates that they left the peninsula, went back to the mainland or back to Europe. And that was the end of the Dominican period and the end of the mission period. So the mission period of operating missions was from 1697 to 1849. And the Dominicans, three Dominicans included, remained in La Paz for a few years beyond that last mission closing, maybe to wrap up paperwork or whatever, and attending to the missions at San Jose del Cabo, near Cabo San Lucas, and at Todos Santos, south of La Paz, were two still thriving or operating missions, but they became more like parish churches than actual missions, because the native Indians are pretty much gone, but mainlanders from Mexico, New Mexican citizens, if you will, came over to the peninsula for opportunity for farming and whatever they could do to make a living. And they attended the mission services or the church services at these and other churches that still remain operating. Mulegé, which is a stone mission, Loreto, all kept having services in the mission church beyond the mission period.
Are there missions in Baja California that are still in operation? They're still functioning in the way that some of the missions, well, most of the missions in Alta California are still functioning?
Well, it's sort of as a museum piece, but they still, the missions at Loreto, at San Javier, and San Jose de Comandú, Mulegé, which the full mission name is Santa Rosalia de Mulegé, Santa Gertrudis, and San Borja, were all intact or refurbished churches that services for the locals remained for some time, uh, especially the ones, like I said, down at San Jose del Cabo and Todos Santos. And then a Loreto mission went into quite a bit of disrepair and didn't have a roof or a bell tower. The small bell tower it had was damaged by an earthquake in the 1800s, and the roof eventually rotted away, and there were not enough energy or financing available to repair it at the time until the 1950s, when an interesting side note story is that the priest at Loreto won the Mexican national lottery. And with that money, he had the mission building repaired, new roof, and a very elaborate, fancy, modern bell tower. So if you ever see pictures of Loreto, it has this very tall bell tower with clocks on it, which do not represent the original mission style of bell tower in any way. But he was really excited about obviously being able to finance the repairs and restoration of the Loreto mission. But
Is there,
there were okay to go back to the mission numbers and all that. There were 17 Jesuit founded missions. Loreto was the first, and the last one was Santa Maria de Los Angeles or Los Angeles, and those were the range of missions. And I name them all in my book, of course. And then the Franciscans founded the one mission on the peninsula, San Fernando de Velicata. And then the Dominicans came in and they reoccupied the missions that were still open on the peninsula from the Franciscans. And they also they had an area of land between San Fernando de Velicata, and I add that de Velicata to separate from the San Fernando mission near Los Angeles.
right?
So between San Fernando and San Diego was an area of about 200 miles, 250 miles of unconverted land, if you want to call it that. There were a lot of wild natives were still there and could pose a threat to the Spanish traveling the road network between the lower and upper California, because a lot of supplies still came in from the peninsula, because traveling by ship up against the current to San Diego was a very arduous, long, and difficult thing to do. So sometimes ships would come to Loreto or even up to Bahia San Luis Gonzaga, offload supplies, and then get on a mule pack train or burro pack train and continue on to the San Diego and above. The Dominicans founded five missions along the coast between San Fernando and San Diego, and then they founded two what they called mountain missions inland from the coast, inland from the El Camino Real, to pacify the wild natives, if you want to call them that, in the mountain areas that could be oppose attacks to the El Camino Real. And also they wanted to connect the El Camino Real of California with the mainland Mexico El Camino Real, or the main chain of missions on the mainland in Sonora. And they had to get over the mountain passes and past Yuma, Arizona to make that connection. That connection never really took place during the mission times, but they established a mission between Ensenada and in the Colorado River called Santa Catalina, and to pacify those natives. So the Dominicans did 7 missions overall, the Franciscans 1, and the Jesuits 17, for a total of 27 missions. And so the last 2 missions, though, were after this 1822 date, and they're up in the very north, south of Tijuana, north of Ensenada, One was called Descanso or El Descanso, and the other is called Guadalupe. And it's the second mission in Baja called Guadalupe. There was another one founded by the Jesuits in 1720. But these last two missions, Descanso was in 1730 when Padre Felix Caballero established it, and he was working on his own. He was not connected with either the government or obviously Spain anymore. And it was upon his own doing that he established Descanso and then founded the mission in Guadalupe in a beautiful valley, which is today's famous wine vineyard area of Baja California, the Guadalupe Valley. And that mission was established in 1834. In either case, both of them only lasted a few years before the Indians had enough of it, and the natives had enough of it, and Caballero fled uh, and went to San Ignacio Mission, but he died a few months later mysteriously after drinking his morning cocoa, and and the Mexicans that came over to the Baja Peninsula to farm and create business or whatever were really distrustful of the Dominicans and the Padres, and in fact Caballero had a kind of a dark cloud along his motives for what he did. He had massive hordes of cattle, and he was trying to accumulate wealth. And so that ended the two final missions, which Max and I call Mexican missions because they weren't Spanish missions. They happened after the Spanish period. So if you add
Well,
the
that's
25 Spanish and those two Mexican missions, that's the 27 Baja California missions.
it's interesting that in Mexico they were still founding missions, at least into the second decade after independence, because the idea that we have, at least in Alta California, is that there was one mission founded basically a little after independence, but once Spain was gone from Alta California, no more missions. Whereas it seems in Mexico there was still a push for a while to continue founding missions.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think from at least the information I have that Sonoma and San Rafael were both founded after technically Spanish independence. Alta California also has two Mexican missions during the Mexican period. If you go by the dates of their documented founding.
It wasn't San Rafael founded. I think San Rafael was founded in 1817. I think it was still Spain at that
Well,
time.
yeah, San Rafael, like many missions were a visita or other things before they were technically a mission with their own
Mm.
padre and their own financial benefactor or account, if you will. Because it's like a mission is like a business. Missions
Hmm.
especially in Baja California, missions moved, and they did in Alta California too. San Diego was originally by the Presidio near the bay, and then moved 5 miles inland in the valley. So all missions, or most missions in Baja California, moved one or more times because there wasn't a lot of pre research done on location to see if the water sources were good there or if the natives would stay there. And so nearly half of the missions in Baja California relocated one or more times to a different spot. And so San Rafael, the way I understand it, was a hospital. It was very healthy to go there to get away from the foggy coast of San Francisco Bay, and it was a mission hospital, if you will, not really a true separate mission until after. At least that's the way Max and I think, mentioned in our book. The actual true is an independent, separate mission. So I was called both Baja and Alta California had two Mexican missions along with their Spanish missions. But
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
everything's up for debate or for change. And in my book, I say, I write this based on the best information that I have available or that we know about from documents and letters written by the Padres back in their time. And I said, I welcome new discoveries to be made. I look forward to doing a revised edition of my book with any changes that are discovered to be made. And I try to keep a very open mind. I'm not like one of these authors who are very stoic and my way or the highway. I'm open to new knowledge to be learned. I'm not saying my book is 100% correct. It's only as correct as I could make it from what the information that I have. And I have a pretty extensive library of books, including the Dawson book series on Baja California, which have a lot of the Padres personal notes translated to English. I'm not a great Spanish speaker or Spanish reader, but fortunately, these works in the 1900s were translated into English. So I had access to all of that for writing my book.
Tell me one of the most interesting stories that jumped out at you during your research on the Baja California missions.
Mm. There are so many. Each mission really has a story to tell. Probably could be a book written by each mission. Some missions only lasted a few years, and others lasted, 90 years or more. And so um, they're all there. It's hard to pinpoint any one. Probably the most interesting thing that people like to talk about are these lost mission legends. And the idea of the lost mission legends came about when the Jesuits were removed, and there's a rumor that they had advance notice of this exodus happening to them, and they secreted or they took all of their treasures, so-called treasures, which I don't believe they ever had, but altar vestments, candle pieces, whatever, candelabras, whatever, gold and pearls, because pearls were very prevalent in Baja California's waters back in those days, and that brought a lot of the Spanish pirates and pearlers over and used the natives to dive for the pearls and so forth. So they knew there was lots of pearls. There were black pearls, which are really shiny gray color actually, but they're called black pearls. And uh, that could be true that they had pearls that were gifts or altar pieces or whatever. And Loreto had supposedly a famous pearl collection, and that had vanished. So this is where the treasure legends came from. There are two predominant lost missions in Baja California. One is in the Sierra de Santa Clara, which is near San Ignacio on the Pacific side of the peninsula, about midway down, if you see my map here. Right about near here is Punta Abreojos. And just inland from there is a strange looking mountains. They're very bizarre looking, Martian looking mountains, if you will. And supposedly that's where the Lost Mission of Santa Clara is located. And then the Jesuit map of 1757 actually shows a mission there called San Juan Bautista. And these were one of the proposed missions that weren't really built, but on the map it says they were started. Um, so San Juan Bautista at the Santa Clara Mountains was one. Another one was called Santa Maria Magdalena, and that is south of Bahia de los Angeles and north of the border between northern and southern Baja California. There are two states that make up Baja California. You were asking earlier. And then the third one is the most famous, is called the Lost Mission of Santa Isabel. And this is the one where they said the Jesuits hoarded the treasures and found a canyon beyond Mission Santa Maria. And then it created a landslide to hide the canyon, and quite elaborate story. But so many people, beginning in the really early 1900s to probably the 1960s or maybe 70s, went exploring for this lost mission based on that data, looking for where there's a water hole or a spring, and looking for this supposed lost mission. But and sadly, they've damaged walls looking for treasures. And Mission Santa Maria is a good example where in its adobe walls, which were built by the Franciscans. Now, the Santa Maria mission was founded by the Jesuits, but they're only there for a few months before they were removed. The Franciscans arrived, and the padre for that mission, Padre Beita, he said, "Oh, this is inadequate," because the Jesuits just built a mission out of palm tree logs and thatched roof, from what we know, and he had a proper mission built of adobe. And it's that adobe mission that there's still standing walls, at least the front and back of it, with the doorway. And on my book's cover is the doorway of that mission, Santa Maria. And that was built by the Franciscans, yet people looking for the Jesuit treasures dug into those walls. And it wasn't even built by the Jesuits, so that's how bad the information was for people.
Wow.
So that's a sad part about the mission lore, is that it's great to go for looking. And I've done a fun lost mission hunt with my friends, and we knew there's no lost missions. It's a way for the guys to get together and go hiking in the canyon in Baja, and we did that too in 2011.
So, what state are the missions in? I know here in Alta California, we had the whole mission revival where a lot of the missions were actually rebuilt and or at least improved from the state they were in. I know that some of the missions, I think you mentioned some of the missions in Baja are in good shape. Others are deteriorating. What's the general aspect of them now?
Well, like there are 8 missions that are intact, if you will, original mission, Spanish mission period construction. Redo was the one that's had the most repairs done to it with a new roof and this fancy new bell tower. Well, new in 1955. The other missions, San Borja, Santa Gertrudis, um, San Luis Gonzaga, which is not the bay name, but it's actually a mission closer to La Paz in southern Baja. They were remained intact, and church services held there, and some still held there. San Jose de Comandu all have great stories, but Comandu, for instance, its mission was in such disrepair that it was the largest California mission in interior square footage. Um, with just massive arches overhead and so forth. From earthquakes or just disuse or lack of maintenance, it was a very dangerous place. And in the early 1900s, there's photos of the doorways filled up with rocks or blocks to block kids from going in there or people going in there and having something fall on them and killing them. And in 1936, supposedly a general ordered it demolished and dynamited it, except for the side chapel. The side chapel was preserved to remain as one place where the church could be, church services could be continue to be held, and that today is what's identified as the mission. But the original mission at Comandu is much, much larger. And I've got some old photos, black and white photos of it from the 1920s and 1906, and when a writer went down there for taking photos. And so they're in disrepair. And then the missions north of San Borja, Santa Maria, San Fernando, El Rosario, Santo Domingo, San Vicente, Santo Tomas, etc., were all made of adobe, and it hadn't gone any further. Baja missions that were stone were adobe at one time, churches, chapels, and they were replaced with stone missions if they were successful at the time. And the Jesuits wanted to, and the Dominicans too, wanted to make a more elaborate, fancy, solid structure, a house of God. So it had to be great. And so there are those stone missions, but most of the missions were adobe. And of course, once you remove the roof of an adobe building, the rain contacts it and winds and eats it away. So the northern Baja California missions started melting away, and some of them are just slumps of adobe now. But there's been some preservation at some of these northern Dominican missions where they've put a plaster coating on them. Now, I went down this last May with a friend and re-examined several of the northern Baja missions, and I see even some of this plaster coating has broken away, and the original adobe is once again showing. So nothing's permanent, nothing lasts forever, as they say. And sadly, the northern Baja missions and any of the southern missions that were made of adobe are in very bad shape. But some were turned into park-like settings with informative signs, walkways, and made into like a park. And several of these missions are, and it's interesting to go and do the walk. And some of these signs are in English too, if you don't read Spanish. And now in Alta California, San Diego North, these missions up here, and I live very close to Mission San Luis Rey in Oceanside. They were also adobe and in pretty much bad repair by the turn of the century. But here in the United States, California, America's California, we had better financing. We had women's groups that got together, historians, and put together the funding to fix these missions, repair them, and bring them back to a church like a modern or like a mission church, like it might have looked like. In some, like I think even San Rafael or Sonoma, the original mission, Adobe mission, was totally gone, and they had to just guess what it looked like. And but there's churches there now that represent the missions, and some are partially the old mission, and some are just all brand new. But Mexico didn't have the ability to do this in the degree that the America could with Alta California missions.
So, you, if I understand correctly, you knew Harry Crosby, the famous Baja explorer. Could you tell us a little bit, first of all, who he was and your relationship with him?
Sure. we've met and chatted together. I got a picture of him and I in my book when I went to his home before he stopped seeing visitors. That was in 2019, and he recently passed away. Gee, I think he was 97. But anyway, Harry Crosby was a photographer and a teacher at a school in La Jolla in San Diego County. And a friend of mine actually was in one of his classes. But so he was a teacher, instructor, and he took his kids on field trips to Mexico, his students. And he was hired to do a book to do photographs for a book about the El Camino Real. It was called Call to California. And I got that book as a kid and I just loved it. I said, "Oh, this is wonderful!" And I just dreamed of because he had photographs of the Mission Trail in Baja California, and you can still see the Mission Trail in Baja California where it isn't eroded away or overgrown completely by cactus and brush. And that just thrilled me to no end. I wanted to travel the El Camino Real, the original Jesuit and beyond El Camino Reals, and only hiked a few miles of it in a few places, but it was a thrill of mine even as a kid. So I became fascinated with Harry Crosby's work on that book called To California. And then he did his book, The King's Highway in Baja California, which was kind of going back over that trip he was hired as a photographer for in 67. And this new book was in 74 that was published. And he went back, I think, with one of his students and re-examined parts that he had missed earlier and wanted to just check out the things again. Oh, so that book was great, and I've got that, of course, too. I got all Harry's books on that he's written, I think, on Baja California. So I met him probably first in I think it was 2002. There was or three. There was a book author event in Baja California at a resort near Rosarito Beach, and Harry was there, and that's when I first met him. And I got a picture of us meeting, and I was just this bubbly kid. Of course, I was already in my 50s, I think, or 40s. I was in my 40s, and I was you can see the excitement in my face meeting Harry Crosby, and that was a great time. And I've since met him again when his new book, Gateway to Alta California, his last book, which, unfortunately, I think the name was poorly chosen because Gateway to Alta California, you're thinking it's about Alta California. No, it's about Baja California between Mission San Fernando de Calicata and San Diego, that last section, because that was kind of quickly done for his book in 1974, The King's Highway in Baja California. And so it wasn't really truly researched in any kind of great degree. He and others totally mapped out the route by using historical writings from the Serra expedition to San Diego in 1769 and logically found the route that was taken based on matching up points and so forth. And that's what Gateway to Alta California is about. And I highly recommend that book. It's got all the details and the biography of the people who were on that expedition, who became the first settlers in San Diego, if you will. So it's an excellent book, and please don't, if you're a Baja California fanatic, don't let the name Gateway to Alta California fool you. It's about Baja California almost entirely. So that was I was with him when that book was introduced at the end of 2003, I think it was, when we had at the Presidio uh, at the Serra Museum at the Presidio in San Diego, and I was there with Harry at that. And then, like I said, my last meeting was Harry's at his home in La Jolla, and he was still very mentally sharp, and we discussed things, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful meeting. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity because shortly after that, COVID hit, and his daughter, overseeing his well-being, he and his wife who lived still together in that home shut off almost all connection. And a friend of mine who does podcasts called the Slow Baja podcast, he went there to record Harry. And unfortunately, the conditions because of COVID, he had this so far apart from him, the microphone picked up too much noise from cars going by, and it was just totally unusable. But it was too bad. But that was his last meeting, probably in 2020, with anyone outside the family.
Yeah, I think Harry Crosby I've never met him, but I do have his books, and I think he was one of these legendary figures in California history, the history of the Californias, and it's just great that you have that connection to him. Are there any other interesting people that you've known in your connection to Baja California and its history that have inspired you or that have been models for you?
Yeah, there's quite a few. There are quite a few authors, and they're authors that all have. And like I said, Howard Gulick of the Lower California Guidebook, who I did meet when I was a kid. And he signed my family's copy of the Lower California Guidebook. As a matter of fact, he told me why he signed it where he did, right above his printed name on the title page. And that's where I sign my book to people when I autograph it. And it's probably a common thing for authors to do. You can't read handwriting, but you can read the name in print. Anyway, so Howard Gulick is one, and Coral Pepper, as I mentioned, is another. She was marvelous. I became close friends for her before she succumbed to her cancer at her home in Colorado, in Coronado, San Diego Bay Area, and so many others. Greg Newman did the book Baja Legends, and he and I became friends and met each other many times. And he just published a new book this last year called Beyond Baja Legends, sort of a follow-up book with more people. So that's Greg Neiman. Geez, so many authors. Tom Miller, the author of the Baja book, which was the first book after the highway was finished, after my little booklet when I was 16 or 15. Gee, I look at them. I'm looking here on my bookshelves, and it just, there's just so many. They all inspire me to a great degree, and I try to emulate them in sharing some passion. And I guess I'm loaded with passion for Baja because I'm a Baja addict. I've got, you know, a lifetime of Baja, and each time I go down there, even if I go to the same places I've been to before, it's like a brand new experience for me because things change. You want to get refreshing your mind, especially at an older age. You want to say, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and makes me more enthusiastic about it. And I still, I have a website, vivabaja.com. That's all one word, Viva Baja. And
Okay,
I
we'll
have
link
all my
that.
trip photo albums are in there. All my book collection, the cover of all my 400 plus Baja California books are in there, and links to other websites are in there. So, and of course, as I said, I still have an interest in writing road logs and stuff. And this is a prototype, a copy, my Baja California road guide, and it never got published. It was done for a Mexican auto insurance company, and they actually financed my travels to research that book. Research actually a photograph mission to take photographs and notes. And while I was doing this photographing mission, I took highway notes where the kilometer marker was for different roads and et cetera, and made this guidebook from it. But it didn't get published. But I have an online version on my vivabaja.com website, so you can see all my road log work and photographs all over Baja California for that guidebook is in there.
So you're still going down regularly to Baja California.
Well, not as often. Getting out isn't quite as easy for me, and have some obligations here. We have my wife's mother living with us now. She's almost 92. And so we're taking
All
care of
right.
her. And, these things happen. But
Yeah,
I
no,
did get
that's
to take this
important.
trip in May. Once a year, hopefully, and maybe more at some day. But yeah, I had a great lifetime. 55, 60 plus years of Baja California travels. So I've been very fortunate.
What do you recommend to people who want to go to Baja California, visit the missions today?
Um, it's easy probably to have an itinerary. Don't stick by it. Be flexible because things do change. Roads get closed, or some of the missions have gates around them, and sometimes they're locked. You can't get into them. Like Mission San Miguel, which is near Ensenada, is in a schoolyard or next to a school, and there's a fence around it. And my friend and I went there. It was a Saturday, but the gate to get on the mission grounds, if you will, was locked. But I just took pictures through the chain link fence, and could update my photos that way. So be flexible. Have an itinerary. I do have a web page, and you can see the link on my vivabaja.com site. It's called a quick look at the missions. And it goes from north to south, not in the order they were founded. My book is in the order they were founded, so it's like a a, chrono- a chronology of the missions from the first to the last, and I include the discovery of California by the Spanish first. Then I include where Padre Kino of Sonora and Arizona mission fame, he came to Baja California too, to two different places to attempt to establish a mission, but more of establish a foothold. One was at La Paz, and the other was just north of Laredo at a place called San Bruno. Until recently, the ruins of the fort that was on top of this hill at San Bruno were still standing, what's left from it. And unfortunately, a couple of years ago, a landowner there cleared away the top of this hill, destroyed the original stuff, and tried to recreate it by restacking the rock walls in the shape of it was a triangular shaped fort at San Bruno.
Oh
And
no.
so you got to go there, and you got to, things are going to change. And so I'm so thankful that I got to go to San Bruno and see it before the original stuff was gone. And I've got all this stuff inside me. I just want to share it. And that's what my website and my Facebook pages, my Viva Baja and my Baja Missions Facebook groups are about to share the excitement with others and let them share their excitement too with everybody.
So, any concerns security wise for people traveling down to Baja these days?
Always a concern, even in the United States. I wouldn't go camping in the backstreet of Los Angeles, so don't go camping in the backstreet of Tijuana or Ensenada. Find a nice, beautiful, either a public, well occupied camping area if that makes you feel comfortable, or be away from where anyone can see you on the highway in case there are any bad people looking to cause trouble. And it's going to happen everywhere. But I've been traveling Baja for like I said, 1 years, and I've never ever had a bad experience. I had some nervous times maybe when a car came by where I didn't think there'd be any cars, but it was just another camper going to the beach or something. You have to live life. And if I'm going to stay sheltered in my home because I'm scared, how is that living? I want to live, and so I'll take the chance. And Baja California to me is still worth that chance. And yeah, you just be smart, be intelligent where you pick if you're going to camp or stay at a hotel or motel. And there's plenty of them on the peninsula now, or an established campground. Just be intelligent. Use your best judgment. And for me, it's always worked out.
So, would you recommend a four-wheel drive vehicle, for example, or is that not necessary?
Well, I do because I'm a four wheeler from the very beginning. But only a couple missions really require four-wheel drive to get to. Santa Maria is probably the toughest road in Baja California, especially now. It's just getting worse and worse since it was built in the end of the or the early 1960s. And it's just a really rough, like the Rubicon Trail near Lake Tahoe, probably worse than that now. I did that last in 2022, so just 3 years ago. So a four-wheel drive isn't absolutely necessary, but a truck, a van, large van, um, SUV by all means. Four-wheel drive is a great insurance, but I always, when I talk about four-wheeling, I always tell everybody, make sure you know to deflate your tires if you have a situation or you need to cross soft sand. Even a two-wheel drive vehicle can cross soft sand if enough air is let out of the tires. So don't be afraid to deflate your tires till they bulge, and then you'll get across that sand. Keep up your momentum. Don't stop in the middle of it if you're two-wheel drive, and you'll be fine. And from my experience, and if you get stuck, even after you deflate more. You can go down as low as 5 pounds. Get out of your situation and have, of course, a air pump. I use a kind of clip onto the battery terminal. It's a very fast air pump that fills up your tires in a couple of minutes, each tire, and then you'll be fine.
I remember when I lived in Southern California, we would oftentimes go down to Northern Baja. I never went down to Southern Baja, which I would love to do one of these days. Um, we always used to buy insurance in Mexico when we crossed the border. Is that something that is still done today or recommended?
Absolutely, absolutely. Your U.S. policies um, don't cover liability in Mexico. It will cover some policies will cover up to 50 miles down from the border for any collision damage, but there's no liability. And so you have to have Mexican liability insurance. And my go-to insurance company is bajabound.com. It's all online. You can print out your policy at home before your trip for whenever days you want it to be valid for. and they're the ones that sponsor my writings. I write a monthly article for their online Baja Bound Bulletin almost every month, and mostly on the missions, and but also about historical people and travel notes, and a link to my articles. I've got over 100 and I think it's 120 articles, 121 articles I've written for them the last few years now, and they're just short articles with photos and maps sometimes, and so Baja Bound is my go-to company. There are other ones though, and several of them all use top name Mexican companies. They're American brokers in this case that sell Mexican auto insurance by agreement, and they give you great service, and that's who I use.
So you can purchase even before you go down.
Yeah, yeah. Because once you cross into Mexico, you're in Mexico, and if you
Yeah,
have an accident before you get to an insurance dealer in Mexico, oops. So
good
get
point.
your insurance. If you don't want to get it online from Baja Bound or other companies online, a lot of them sell online. There are Mexican insurance sales at the border in San Isidro or Calexico or Tecate before you cross over into Mexico. But the online is obviously the way to go, easy. Of course, the other thing when you cross into Mexico, you do need to stop at the border. It's usually called the something to declare lane. So in San Isidro, it's the far right lane. You got to pull over and you walk into a room. That's the INM, which is Immigration and Naturalization of Mexico, if in English, an INM office to get your FMM. It's like a visa, not truly a visa, but it's a traveler's permit, if you will, for non-Mexican citizens. In this case, American and Canadian citizens. So you get your FMM. It's free for up to 7 days in Mexico, which covers probably most of the situation. 180-day or half a year FMM is about $40 roughly right now at the exchange rate. And that's good for multiple trips in and out from Mexico. So that's it. So Mexican auto insurance and the tourist permit, the FMM, is required. And after that, go have a taco. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks, David. Just to finish up, what do you think we in the United States and in U.S. California could better understand about Baja California, our relation to it? What misconceptions are there, or what's the biggest misconception that we can sort of dispel by learning more about Baja California and its history?
Well, to me, in my case, it's the fact that California started in Baja California. That was the first California. The California mission started in Baja California, Florida, and then came north, and this is all California. That the Baja is a land of all cactus and desert. It isn't. There's mountains up to 10,000 feet high with pine forests, aspen trees. It's beautiful. And that's in northern Baja California. And then the area of south of San Diego, as far as about San Quintin, is very much the San Diego style Mediterranean climate. And it's the east side. San Felipe and south is desert, and eventually south of San Quintin or south of El Rosario uh, meets up at the bottom of the mountain range of the San Pedro Martir, the Pine Forest Mountains. It all becomes desert, and then there's tropical oases. There's where water is, and now you're getting down in the tropics. Matter of fact, southern Baja California is at the same latitude as Hawaii. So you and the Big Island are in the same latitude. It's the Tropic of Cancer, and at noon on um, June 21st, the sun is over your head, and you have no shadow. So that's in southern Baja California, and then you get tropical. There's coconuts that grow in trees down there, and of course mangoes by the loads. Those wonderful mangoes and papayas, and you feel like you're in a tropical paradise. So it's a desert tropical mix in the south half, some tropical oases kind of scattered throughout, and then a Southern California climate in the northwest and a desert climate on the northeast with pine forest mountains from the American border south, 200 plus miles. There's pine forests and beautiful mountains. Got everything there.
Sounds amazing. David, I don't want to keep you any longer. This has been great, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom. I would say to everybody who's watching or listening, go to vivabaja.com, get the book, right? Baja California, Land of Missions, and also uh, follow David in his Facebook group and all the other places where he's at. Is that right, David?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Facebook has kind of taken over. There used to be well, there still is a discussion forum called Baja Nomad, and that's still there, but it's really Facebook has kind of sucked away a lot of the old forum style chat room stuff, and Facebook is where it's happening. And Mexicans use Facebook for websites, if you will, to advertise their businesses, their motels. They're big on Facebook in Mexico, and so you can see Facebook pages for everything in Baja California too, to make arrangements and so forth. So,
Well,
and
that's great.
people can contact me through my website. Email addresses on my website, info@vivabaja.com, and I'm happy to answer questions for you guys. You just drop me a note, and I'll do the best I can to give you what I think is a good answer. And I won't make up one. I'll let you know if I don't know.
That's great. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And yeah, everybody, go to Baja California. It's worth it.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thank you.